A small bundle, wrapped in tattered cloth, lay by the riverside. The tiny baby inside cried loudly, her voice growing hoarse as hours passed. The mother who left her there had already disappeared into the busy streets of Lagos, never looking back. Mr. Adebayo, an old man with grey hair and gentle eyes, was walking along his usual path when he heard the strange sound. "What is that noise?" he muttered to himself, following the crying until he reached the riverbank. He gasped when he saw the source. A baby? Who would leave a child here? He carefully picked up the bundle and unwrapped it slightly. Inside was a beautiful baby girl with bright eyes that looked up at him through her tears. "Don't worry, little one," he said softly. "I will take care of you." He carried the baby to his small house on the outskirts of Lagos. His neighbor, Mrs. Okafor, came over when she heard about the baby. "Adebayo, what will you do with her?" she asked with concern. "I will raise her as my own," he replied firmly. "I will call her Amara, for she came to me by God's grace." "But you are an old man living alone. How will you manage?" "I will find a way," he said. "This child needs someone, and God has put her in my path." Years passed, and Amara grew into a bright young girl. Every morning, she would prepare for school with excitement. "Baba, I finished my homework," she would announce proudly to Mr. Adebayo, who she called Baba. "Good girl, Amara. Education is your greatest treasure," he would respond, his eyes crinkling with pride. After school, while other children played, Amara would help their household by selling fruit on the busy streets of Lagos. "Fresh oranges, sweet bananas," she would call out to passers-by. One hot afternoon, as Amara was crossing a street with her tray of fruit, a sleek black car sped around the corner. The driver, a wealthy woman named Mrs. Falami, was talking on her phone and didn't see the young girl until it was too late. There was a terrible screech of tires, then a thud. Amara's fruit scattered across the road as she fell. "Someone call an ambulance!" shouted a street vendor. Mrs. Falami briefly looked back through her rearview mirror, but kept driving, afraid of the consequences. "That woman just hit a child and drove away," someone in the crowd yelled. What Mrs. Falami didn't know was that the girl she had just struck was her own daughter, the baby she had abandoned by the riverside 10 years earlier. At the hospital, Mr. Adebayo sat anxiously by Amara's bed. "Baba, am I going to be okay?" Amara asked weakly. "Yes, my child. You are strong," he assured her, though worry lined his face. For months, Mr. Adebayo worked extra jobs to pay for Amara's medical bills. His health began to fail, but he never complained. One evening, Amara found him struggling to breathe. "Baba, what's wrong?" she cried out in fear. "Amara," he whispered, "you have been a blessing to me. Remember to always be kind and work hard." That night, the old man who had saved her life passed away peacefully in his sleep. Amara was devastated. "What will I do now, Baba?" she sobbed at his funeral. "How will I survive without you?" Determined to honor Mr. Adebayo's wishes, Amara continued her education. She sold fruit in the mornings, attended school during the day, and studied by candlelight at night. "I will make you proud, Baba," she would whisper to his photograph each night. Years of hard work paid off. At 22, Amara had grown into a beautiful and accomplished young woman. She graduated at the top of her class and was offered a position at Falami Industries, one of the largest companies in Lagos. On her first day, she caught the attention of the CEO's son, Daniel Falami. "You must be the new marketing assistant," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Daniel." "Amara Adebayo," she replied with a professional smile. Over the next few months, Daniel found reasons to visit the marketing department. He was drawn to Amara's intelligence and determination. "Would you like to have dinner with me this weekend?" he finally asked one day. Amara hesitated. "I don't think it's appropriate to date my boss." "I'm not your direct boss," Daniel argued with a charming smile. "And I'd really like to get to know you better." Eventually, Amara agreed. Their relationship blossomed quickly. Daniel was kind and respectful. everything Amara had dreamed of. 6 months later, Daniel proposed. "I want you to meet my mother before the wedding," he said. "She can be difficult, but she's my only family." "Of course," Amara agreed nervously. "Family is important." The day of the meeting arrived. Daniel drove Amara to a mansion in the wealthiest part of Lagos. "My mother is very particular," he warned as they walked to the door. "Don't take anything she says personally." Mrs. Folami was waiting in the sitting room. When Amara walked in, both women froze. The resemblance between them was striking. The same high cheekbones, the same distinctive eyes. "Who are your parents?" Mrs. Folami asked sharply, her voice barely a whisper. "I was raised by a kind man named Mr. Adebayo," Amara replied, confused by the woman's reaction. "He found me as a baby. I never knew my birth parents." Mrs. Folami's hand trembled as she reached for her tea. Could this be the baby she had abandoned all those years ago? The timing was right, and the resemblance undeniable. "Mother, are you all right?" Daniel asked with concern. "Just a headache," she replied quickly. "Daniel, could you get me my medication from upstairs?" When Daniel left, Mrs. Folami studied Amara intensely. "Where did this man find you?" she asked. "By the Riverside, on the east side of Lagos," Amara answered, feeling increasingly uncomfortable. Mrs. Folami's worst fears were confirmed, but she forced a smile. "How interesting. Daniel speaks very highly of you." When they left, Mrs. Folami immediately called her private investigator. "I need a DNA test done discreetly," she instructed. "I'll send you a hair sample." The next time Amara visited, Mrs. Folami offered to fix her hair before dinner, carefully collecting a strand. A week later, the results confirmed what she already knew. Amara was her daughter, which meant Daniel was about to marry his half-sister. "I forbid this marriage," Mrs. Folami announced suddenly during their engagement dinner. Daniel was shocked. "Mother, what are you talking about?" "She's not good enough for this family," Mrs. Folami declared coldly. "That's not fair," Daniel protested. "You don't even know her." "I know more than you think," his mother replied cryptically. Amara felt tears burning in her eyes. "I should go," she whispered. "No," Daniel said firmly. "Mother, either explain yourself or apologize to Amara." Mrs. Folami remained silent. "Then we'll leave," Daniel decided, "and I will marry Amara, with or without your blessing." As weeks passed, Mrs. Folami became desperate. The wedding plans continued, and her attempts to sabotage the relationship failed. Finally, the day before the wedding, she couldn't bear the burden any longer. "Daniel, Amara, I must speak with you both," she said, her voice trembling as they reluctantly met at her request. "What is it now, Mother?" Daniel asked coldly. "The truth is—" Mrs. Folami took a deep breath. "Amara is my daughter, your half-sister." The room went deadly silent. "What?" Amara whispered in disbelief. "I abandoned a baby girl by the riverside 25 years ago," Mrs. Folami admitted, tears streaming down her face. "I was young, unmarried and scared. Daniel's father had just married me, and I couldn't let him know I was pregnant from a previous relationship." Daniel stood up abruptly. "You're lying. This is just another attempt to stop our wedding." "I had a DNA test done," Mrs. Folami admitted. "Amara is my daughter." Amara felt the room spinning. You're the woman who hit me with your car when I was a child. You didn't even stop to help." Mrs. Folami's face went pale. "What? 10 years after you abandoned me, you hit me with your car while I was selling fruit and you drove away," Amara said, her voice steady despite her tears. "The man who found me by the river cared for me. He worked himself to death to pay for my medical bills after your hit and run." Daniel looked at his mother in horror. "Is this true?" Mrs. Folami couldn't speak, but her silence was answer enough. "You abandoned your own child, then years later nearly killed her and fled." Daniel's voice shook with anger. "And now you've let us plan to marry, knowing we are siblings." "I tried to stop the wedding," Mrs. Folami protested. By lying and manipulating instead of telling the truth, Amara said quietly. The man who found me had nothing, but he gave me everything. You had everything, but gave me nothing. In the aftermath of the revelation, the wedding was cancelled. Daniel and Amara were both shattered, their love turning to ash in an instant. I never want to see either of you again, Daniel told his mother the day after the truth came out. He packed his bags and left Lagos, unable to face the city where his life had fallen apart. Amara, now alone again, quit her job at Folami Industries. The company name itself made her sick to her stomach. You destroyed my life twice, she told Mrs. Folami before leaving. Once when you abandoned me, and again when you let me fall in love with my own brother. Mrs. Folami tried desperately to make amends, sending gifts and pleading for forgiveness. Please, just talk to me, she begged, during one of her unannounced visits to Amara's small apartment. Why? Amara asked coldly. So you can feel better about what you did? So your conscience can be clear. You're my daughter, Mrs. Folami insisted. Number I was never your daughter. I was your mistake, your secret, your shame. The only parent I ever had is dead, and you helped put him in his grave. Months passed. Daniel had disappeared to somewhere in Europe, sending only occasional brief messages to Amara. The sister he was still learning to know instead of love. The messages grew less frequent, then stopped entirely. Mrs. Folami's health began to deteriorate. The stress and guilt wore on her body like a disease. She spent her days alone in her mansion, the wealth she had valued above her own child now meaningless. On a rainy evening 3 years later, Amara received a call from Mrs. Folami's lawyer. She's dying, he said simply. She's asking for you. Amara hung up without answering. That night, she stared at the old photograph of Mr. Adebayo, the only father she had ever known. What would you want me to do, Baba? She whispered to the picture. The following day, Amara stood in the doorway of Mrs. Folami's hospital room. The once proud woman was now a shadow, thin and grey against the white sheets. Amara, Mrs. Folami whispered, her voice barely audible. You came. I wanted to see it, Amara said flatly. See what? If there was anything of me in you, if there was any reason to feel connected to you at all. Mrs. Folami reached out a trembling hand. Please. I don't forgive you, Amara said, stepping back. I can't. Mrs. Folami's hand fell limply to the bed. I know I don't deserve it. It's not about what you deserve, Amara replied. It's about what I lost. A chance at love. A chance at family. Everything. She turned to leave but paused at the door. Daniel never came back, did he? Mrs. Folami shook her head weakly, tears streaming down her hollow cheeks. Amara nodded and left without another word. As she walked out of the hospital into the humid Lagos night, she felt no closure, no resolution, only the same emptiness that had been her companion since the day she learned the truth. 2 days later, Mrs. Folami died alone in her hospital room. She left everything to her children in her will, with no conditions attached. 1 week after the sparsely attended funeral, Amara received another call from Mrs. Folami's lawyer. Miss Adebayo, you need to come to the office. There are papers that require your signature. Amara sat stiffly in the lawyer's office as he explained the terms of the will. Half of the estate is yours, he said, sliding the documents across the desk. The other half belongs to Daniel, if he ever returns to claim it. Amara stared at the papers. The amount written there was more money than she could have earned in several lifetimes. What am I supposed to do with this? She asked quietly. The lawyer shrugged. Whatever you want. It's yours unconditionally. After days of consideration, Amara signed the papers. She owed me this much at least, she told herself. She owed me far more than money could ever repay. She used the inheritance to buy a small house far from Lagos, where nobody knew her story. The rest she put in the bank, touching it only when necessary. The money was cold comfort, blood money that couldn't fill the emptiness inside her.